I never thought a pile of gravel would become the center of the biggest fight of my life, but looking back now, I guess that's how most disasters start. Not with explosions, not with screaming, just with something small that nobody pays attention to until it's too late. The first sign should have been the orange stakes, not the fence, not the lawsuit, not even the police showing up. Those little orange stakes were the first warning that somebody had decided my property wasn't really mine anymore. My name is Ryan Mercer, and for almost 9 years I lived on a quiet corner lot just outside Cedar Ridge, Tennessee. Nothing fancy, just a small ranch-style house with 2 bedrooms, a detached garage, and a gravel drive that wrapped around the side yard. I ran a landscaping company out of that property. Nothing huge. Just me, a couple of employees, a truck, a trailer, and enough equipment to keep food on the table. The driveway was important because everything had a place. The trailer parked along one side. The truck stayed near the garage. Mulch deliveries came through regularly. It wasn't beautiful, but it worked. And honestly, I liked it that way. I knew every family on the street. I knew whose dog barked at squirrels. I knew who left Christmas decorations up until February. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved from their porches and brought over extra barbecue during football season. Then the Holloways moved in next door. Nathan Holloway and his wife, Victoria. Now, have you ever met somebody who walks into a room and immediately acts like they're doing everyone a favor just by being there? That was Nathan. The moving trucks weren't even gone before he was talking about property values. Everything out of his mouth sounded like a business presentation. He didn't have conversations, he made announcements. We're planning some major upgrades. This street has a lot of untapped potential. We're investing heavily into the neighborhood. I remember standing there one afternoon while he talked about outdoor living spaces and architectural aesthetics, and all I could think was, "Buddy, it's a neighborhood, not a luxury resort." Still, I didn't dislike him, not at first. People are different. Some folks drive pickup trucks. Some folks drive imported SUVs that cost more than my entire landscaping setup. No problem. Live your life. Then I noticed he kept staring at my driveway, not casually, not the way neighbors glance around. He studied it. Every time he walked outside, his eyes drifted toward that strip of gravel running beside my house. At first I thought I was imagining things. Then one morning I walked outside with a cup of coffee and nearly tripped over 2 bright orange survey stakes sticking out of the ground. Right in my driveway, I just stood there staring. The coffee suddenly didn't matter. I looked toward Nathan's house. No workers, no survey crew, nothing, just those stakes. I pulled them out and tossed them into the bed of my truck. Figured somebody made a mistake. Simple, problem solved. The next morning they were back. Same location, same spacing. Like they had never moved. That's when I knew it wasn't an accident. Around dinner time, there was a knock on my door. Nathan stood there smiling. The kind of smile people wear when they're pretending to be friendly. "Hey, Ryan," he said. "Got a minute?" I already knew I wasn't going to enjoy this conversation. "Sure." He pointed toward the driveway. "We've been looking at the layout, and honestly it seems inefficient." I remember blinking. Inefficient. It was a driveway, not a factory. He kept talking. "We host guests pretty often, and it would make things much easier if we shared that section." Shared. That word hung in the air because there was only one problem. It wasn't shared, it belonged to me, so I told him exactly that. "Sorry, Nathan, that's my property." His smile disappeared so fast it was almost impressive. Not angry, not yet, just annoyed. Like a customer hearing a restaurant had run out of something he wanted. He looked toward the gravel strip. Then back at me. "We'll figure something out." Those were the exact words. "We'll figure something out." And for some reason they bothered me more than if he'd threatened me outright. Maybe because it sounded like a decision had already been made. A week later I found out I was right. I had spent the entire day working a large commercial job across town. It was nearly sunset when I finally pulled back into the neighborhood. I remember turning onto my street and seeing something that immediately felt wrong. At first I couldn't figure out what it was. Then my stomach dropped. Fresh asphalt. Brand new black asphalt. Smooth, perfect, expensive. And it stretched directly across part of my gravel drive. For a second I honestly thought I was looking at the wrong property. Then I saw the fence. A sleek modern privacy fence extending several feet onto my land, blocking access to part of my driveway completely. I sat in my truck with both hands gripping the steering wheel. The engine was still running. But I couldn't move, because there are moments in life when your brain refuses to process what your eyes are seeing. This was one of them. Eventually I got out and walked across the yard. Every step made the situation feel more real. The asphalt wasn't an accident. The fence wasn't temporary. Somebody had spent serious money building this, and somebody expected it to stay there. I marched straight toward the Holloway house. By the time I reached the front porch, my pulse was pounding in my ears. I knocked hard. A few seconds later, Victoria opened the door holding a wine glass. Like it was any ordinary evening, I pointed toward the fence. "Tell me that's coming down." She looked past me, took a slow sip of wine, then smiled, not kindly, not apologetically, confidently. Nathan had everything measured, not surveyed, not verified, measured. And somehow that single word made me even angrier, because at that moment I realized something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They genuinely believed they could take what they wanted and explain it later. What I didn't know yet was that the real fight hadn't even started. Because that night, after digging through old documents in my garage, I was about to discover something that would turn a bad situation into a full-scale war between neighbors. That night I barely slept. Not because I was angry. Anger comes and goes. This was different. It was that cold feeling you get when somebody crosses a line so completely that you realize they're operating under a completely different set of rules than you are. Around midnight, I was sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by paperwork, property maps, closing documents, tax records, the original certified survey from when I bought the house. Every document told the same story. The disputed strip wasn't even close. It wasn't a gray area. It wasn't confusing. It wasn't debatable. That section belonged to me, period. The next morning I called Nathan. I figured I'd give him one chance. One, remove the fence, I said. Remove the asphalt. Fix it before this gets ugly. There was silence for a moment, then he laughed. Actually laughed, not nervous laughter, not awkward laughter. The kind of laugh somebody gives when they think they've already won. "If you have a problem," he said, "call an attorney." Then he hung up just like that. No discussion, no compromise, no apology. And that's the moment something changed inside me. Because up until then I'd still been treating this like a misunderstanding. After that call it became something else. A challenge. So I hired an attorney. A very good one. His name was Mark Bennett, a local property lawyer who looked like he spent weekends fishing and weekdays dismantling people's bad decisions in court. After reviewing the documents, he leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said, "that's one of the dumbest encroachment cases I've seen in years." I wish I could say that made me feel better. It didn't, because he immediately followed it with words nobody wants to hear. "This will take time." And that's the thing about the legal system. People watch movies and think justice happens overnight. Real life doesn't work that way. Paperwork takes time. Filings take time. Hearings take time. Everything takes time. Meanwhile, Nathan acted like he'd already won. Every morning his luxury SUV sat right there on my property. Every evening their outdoor lights glowed across land that didn't belong to them. Weekend parties started showing up. Guests parked along the street. Music drifted across the neighborhood. People laughed and drank wine 20 feet away from a fence that should never have existed. The more I watched it, the more something strange happened. I stopped being angry. Instead, I became patient. And patience can be dangerous, especially when you're dealing with somebody who mistakes it for weakness. A few days later, I was scheduling a mulch delivery for one of my landscaping projects. The supplier called asking where I wanted it dropped. Then an idea popped into my head. A very simple idea, completely legal, completely harmless, and absolutely impossible to ignore. The next Tuesday morning, a dump truck rolled into my driveway. I was already outside waiting. The driver stepped out. "You want it by the garage." I pointed toward the disputed strip. "Nope." His eyebrows lifted. "All of it. Every single pound." The truck backed up. hydraulics engaged, then the bed lifted, and suddenly a mountain of dark brown mulch came pouring down directly onto my property, the same property Nathan had paved over. Within minutes, his beautiful asphalt extension disappeared beneath a massive pile of landscaping material. It looked ridiculous, glorious, but ridiculous. I crossed my arms and watched. And right on schedule, the front door of the Holloway house exploded open. Nathan came storming outside wearing a bathrobe and slippers. I almost laughed. Almost. "What the hell are you doing?" I shrugged. "Using my property." His face turned bright red. "You can't block our driveway." I pointed toward the survey map folded under my arm. "Actually, I can." For a second I thought he might lose control completely. Instead, he stood there shaking with frustration. Then he turned around and marched back inside. The mulch stayed exactly where it was. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, I didn't touch it, didn't move it, didn't explain it. The pile simply existed. A giant physical reminder that ownership matters, and apparently that drove Nathan crazy. He started making loud phone calls whenever I was outside, talking about unreasonable neighbors, talking about harassment, talking about lawsuits. Victoria joined in too. She began taping little notes to the fence. One read, "Please maintain community standards." Another said, "This is affecting property values." That one actually made me laugh, because the illegal fence was affecting my property values a whole lot more. Still, I ignored them because I had already started planning phase 2. See, most people make the mistake of showing all their cards at once. I wasn't interested in that. Escalation works best when it happens gradually. One move at a time. A week later, another delivery arrived. This time it wasn't mulch, it was gravel, 10 tons of it. The driver looked from me to the property line, then back to me. "You sure?" "Oh, I'm sure." The truck tipped. And the sound that followed was beautiful. An avalanche of stone crashing onto the exact section Nathan had stolen. The pile spread wider than the mulch, taller than the mulch, impossible to ignore. Nathan came outside before the truck even finished unloading. This time there was no bathrobe, no fake smile, no attempt at diplomacy. He looked furious. "You are obstructing access." "No," I said calmly. "I'm storing materials on my property." "You know exactly what you're doing." "Yeah," I said, "I do." That conversation lasted less than 30 seconds, because 5 minutes later he called the police. Now most people probably would have gotten nervous. I didn't, not anymore. I had spent days preparing. Every document was organized. Every survey was copied. Every photograph was time-stamped. Everything sat neatly inside a folder waiting for exactly this moment. About 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. The officer stepped out and immediately looked exhausted, like he had already seen this movie before. He spent several minutes listening to Nathan explain how I was blocking access. Then he came over and asked for paperwork. I handed him my survey. Nathan handed him his. The officer studied both. His expression slowly changed. Then he looked up, back at Nathan. Then back at the paperwork. Finally, he sighed. "Sir," he said, "where exactly did this survey come from?" Nathan hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. And that's when everything started falling apart, because what he'd handed over wasn't a certified survey at all. It was essentially a homemade measurement sketch. No official stamp, no licensed surveyor, no legal authority whatsoever. The officer stared at it for another moment. Then he looked directly at Nathan. "Sir, this is a civil matter." Nathan pointed toward the gravel pile. "But he's blocking our driveway." The officer didn't even blink. His response was immediate. "Then maybe you shouldn't have built your driveway on somebody else's property." Silence, complete silence. Even the neighborhood seemed quiet. I watched Nathan's face carefully, because that was the first moment I saw something new. Not arrogance, not confidence, fear, just a glimpse. A tiny crack in the armor, but it was there. And once I saw it, I knew something important. For the first time since this started, Nathan realized there was a very real possibility he could lose. What neither of us knew yet was that the next move wouldn't involve gravel, mulch, lawyers, or police. It would involve something so absurd, so visible, and so impossible to ignore that it would push this entire war into territory neither side could walk back from. A week after the police left, the neighborhood settled into this weird, uncomfortable silence. Nobody said much. Nobody picked sides publicly, but everybody was watching. You could feel it. Every time I walked outside, somebody's blinds shifted. Somebody's porch conversation stopped. People love pretending they don't enjoy neighborhood drama until there's actual neighborhood drama. Then suddenly everyone's an expert. Nathan stopped hosting parties. The string lights hanging over his patio stayed dark. Victoria stopped leaving notes on the fence. The confidence they'd been carrying around for months seemed a little heavier now, a little forced. And honestly, that's when I should have known they were planning something, because people like Nathan rarely admit they're wrong. They double down. That's exactly what happened. A few days later, I made what would become my final move before court. Now look, I'll admit this one was a little petty. Not illegal, not destructive, just memorable. I had a portable restroom delivered, bright blue, construction site blue, the kind you can spot from half a mile away. The delivery driver asked where I wanted it. I pointed directly at the disputed property strip. Dead center. The man laughed, actually laughed. You serious? Oh, absolutely. Within minutes, that giant blue box stood right between Nathan's luxury landscaping project and the street. You couldn't miss it. Neither could anybody else. The reactions were immediate. Dog walkers slowed down. Drivers glanced over. Neighbors suddenly found reasons to take evening strolls. And every single person who passed by looked directly at that porta potty. The visual message was impossible to miss. That stolen property wasn't blending into the neighborhood anymore. Now it was drawing attention. Exactly the kind of attention Nathan hated. The next morning, I caught him staring at it through his front window. Just standing there, coffee cup in hand, looking defeated. For a brief second, I almost felt sorry for him, almost. Then I remembered the fence, the asphalt, the arrogance, the laughter on the phone, the feeling of coming home and seeing somebody else's decision sitting on my land. No, the sympathy passed quickly. About 2 weeks later, I got served. A process server pulled into my driveway around lunchtime, handed me a stack of legal papers. Nathan was suing obstruction, property damage, loss of use, emotional distress. That last one nearly made me choke laughing. Emotional distress. Coming from the guy who built a fence on somebody else's property, I carried the documents straight to Mark's office. He read them quietly, then smiled, not a big smile, the kind lawyers get when the other side accidentally helps them. Good, he said. Now we get to respond. And respond we did: encroachment, illegal construction, property damage, trespassing, attorney fees. Every documented violation, every photograph, every survey, every receipt, everything went into the filing. For the first time since this started, I felt calm because the battlefield had changed. This wasn't happening in driveways anymore. Now it was happening in a courtroom, and facts tend to do pretty well there. Court day arrived faster than expected. The courtroom wasn't impressive. No dramatic movie setting. No giant audience. Just fluorescent lights, wooden benches, and people waiting for judges to settle problems they couldn't solve themselves. Nathan arrived wearing a tailored charcoal suit. Victoria sat beside him. Neither looked at me. I think that bothered me more than if they'd stared. The confidence was gone. The superiority was gone. What remained looked a lot like anxiety. Mark and I sat quietly reviewing paperwork. When our case was called, everyone stood. Then everything became very simple. The judge listened. Nathan spoke first. He talked about property improvements, neighborhood appearance, shared usage, reasonable assumptions. The longer he talked, the worse it sounded, because underneath all the fancy language was one unavoidable fact. He had built on land that wasn't his. Then it was our turn. I kept my testimony simple. No dramatic speeches, no emotional performance, just facts. The timeline, the fence, the asphalt, the conversations, the documents. Then the surveyor testified. And honestly, that was probably the moment the case ended. The surveyor had 30 years of experience. Calm voice, professional demeanor, no exaggeration. He explained every boundary marker, every measurement, every property line, like a teacher explaining basic math. The judge followed along carefully. Then came the question that changed everything. He looked toward Nathan. Can you provide the certified survey you relied upon before construction began? Silence. Just a few seconds, but they felt longer. Nathan shifted in his chair, looked at Victoria, then back at the judge. Finally, he admitted it. There wasn't a certified survey, there never had been. He had measured it himself, based on what he believed made sense. I swear you could feel the entire room change. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. That subtle shift when credibility leaves the building. The judge leaned back, reviewed the documents one final time, then delivered the ruling. Calm, direct, final. The fence must be removed, the asphalt must be removed, the property restored to original condition. All costs paid by Nathan Holloway, including attorney fees, just like that. Months of fighting ended in less than 5 minutes. No dramatic shouting, no courtroom explosion, just consequences, real consequences. And sometimes that's even more satisfying. The demolition crews arrived 4 days later. I watched from my driveway as workers dismantled everything. The fence came down first, panel by panel, post by post. Then came the asphalt. Jackhammers broke apart the smooth black surface Nathan had been so proud of. Chunk after chunk disappeared into dump trucks. By sunset, the stolen driveway extension was gone. The gravel underneath gradually reappeared, like it had been waiting patiently all along. Nathan never came outside, not once. I saw him through a window a couple times, that's it. No speeches, no apologies, no final confrontation, nothing. At first I thought that would bother me. I thought I needed some big cinematic moment, some admission that he was wrong. But standing there watching the last pieces of asphalt get hauled away, I realized something. I didn't need it. The court order was enough. Reality was enough. Because in the end, this was never really about gravel. It wasn't about parking. It wasn't about a fence. It was about respect. The moment Nathan convinced himself my boundaries were negotiable, this entire outcome became inevitable. And honestly, that's the lesson I still think about. Most conflicts don't start with huge betrayals. They start with tiny tests, a small favor, a small assumption, a small step over a line, then another, until somebody finally says no. Looking back now, could I have handled things differently? Probably. Maybe I should have gone straight to court. Maybe the mulch was unnecessary. Maybe the gravel pile was excessive. Maybe the porta potty crossed into comedy. I don't know. That's why I still think about it, because the truth isn't always clean. Standing your ground sounds noble until you're the one doing it. Then suddenly there's 100 gray areas, 100 choices, 100 opportunities to go too far. I won legally. There's no debate about that. But sometimes I wonder if both of us lost something else along the way. The neighborhood never felt quite the same afterward. People became more cautious, more guarded, more aware of where every property line sat. Maybe that's good. Maybe it isn't. So now I'm curious what you think. If you came home and found your neighbor building on your property, what would you have done? Would you have gone directly to court? Would you have tried diplomacy longer? Or would you have handled it the same way I did, one calculated step at a time, making the situation impossible to ignore? And more importantly, where do you personally draw the line between defending your rights and becoming part of the conflict yourself? Let me know down in the comments, because I've learned one thing from telling these stories. Everybody has a boundary. The interesting part is finding out what happens when someone crosses it.